On Father's Day, as I watched my son Daniel hand his father-in-law a new Rolex, the heavy silence in the room was a stark contrast to the small crumpled $5 bill he'd just shoved into my hand. It was a humiliating, gut-wrenching moment, a cheap trinket for the man who'd sacrificed everything, and a luxury timepiece for a man who'd given nothing. In that instant, I finally saw the truth I'd been blind to for decades. I wasn't his father. I was his bank. And the most painful part? My son had been a stranger to me for years, a stranger who had no respect or gratitude for the sacrifices I had made. It was the moment my world shattered, and I decided to take it back. I had been raised to believe a man puts his family first, always. It was a lesson my own father had etched into my heart. I was only 8 years old when I watched him sell his best suit to buy medicine for my younger sister, whispering that a man's family always comes first. Those words became my sacred law. When Daniel was born, I was a young man working at a textile factory, and I swore he would have everything I never did. My wife Sarah and I worked double shifts and extra hours, pouring every cent into his future. Every penny we earned was for him, from better diapers to a safer crib. We bought a small 2-bedroom house just so he'd have a yard to play in. The joy on his face when I built that little swing set was worth every hour of lost sleep. When he was 7, we put him in private school. It cost half my monthly salary, but we told ourselves it was an investment. Sarah started working part-time at a bakery to help with the bills. We ate beans and rice 4 nights a week so Daniel could eat lunch with his friends at school. Piano lessons came next, at $200 a month. My hands grew calloused and scarred from the extra plumbing work I took on just to cover the cost. But hearing him play for the first time filled me with a pride I could not describe. For his 15th birthday, he wanted an electric guitar. I worked 3 straight months of Christmas overtime at the warehouse to buy him the Fender he had his eye on. His hug that Christmas was the most beautiful reward I could have asked for. College was the biggest sacrifice of our lives. We refinanced the house and sold our only car to buy a cheaper one. $45,000 over 4 years. Daniel would study business administration at a prestigious university, a place where he could build a real future. But during those college years, Daniel came home less and less. His new friends, his new experiences, his new vision for the world seemed to have no room for our small neighborhood. The calls became sporadic, the visits a chore. After he graduated, I even convinced my boss to give him a job at my company. He's my son, I told him with pride. He studied for this. Daniel worked there for 6 months before quitting to find something better. He never thanked me for the recommendation. He met Patricia at his next job, a woman from a wealthy family with social connections. Their wedding cost $20,000, and Sarah and I paid for every last detail. The dress, the flowers, the venue, the honeymoon. It's their special day, we told ourselves as we signed each check. 2 years later, the twins arrived, and my heart was filled with renewed joy. I watched them every weekend while Daniel and Patricia went out. Every birthday, every Christmas, every special occasion came with generous gifts from me. At some point, without realizing it, I had stopped being a father and become the provider. The conversations turned transactional. Dad, we need help with the mortgage. Dad, the kids need new school uniforms. Dad, the car broke down. And I always said yes. I always found a way, because that's what a good father does, right? But the years would teach me a bitter lesson. There's a world of difference between raising grateful children and raising children who see you as a resource. The first hint of this painful truth arrived when I turned 58. Sarah had passed away the year before after a long battle with cancer, and I had hoped Daniel would be there for me during my grief. Instead, his birthday call lasted exactly 3 minutes. "Happy birthday, Dad. Listen, I have an urgent favor to ask. The twins want to join a tennis club, but the registration is due tomorrow. Can you transfer $5,000? I promise I'll pay you back next month." There were no questions about how I was feeling, if I needed company, or if I had been sleeping well since I lost my partner. Just a direct request wrapped in the false urgency he'd learned to use so well. That night, as I transferred the money, I stared at a photograph of Sarah. Am I doing something wrong? I asked her smiling image. Of course, there was no answer, but something inside me began to stir.
That the $5,000 never came back.
Nor did the $8,000 I loaned him 3 months later for Daniel's innovative business idea, or the $12,000 for his kitchen renovation. Every promise of repayment vanished like smoke, replaced by new emergencies that required my financial intervention. I started keeping a private record, a small notebook I kept in my nightstand. I wrote down the date, the amount, the reason, and the promise to repay. The pages filled up faster than I expected. Meanwhile, family invitations began to follow a predictable pattern. Birthday parties for the twins, where I was in charge of the expensive gifts. Sunday dinners where Patricia would casually mention the upcoming family vacations they couldn't afford. Gatherings where my presence was measured by my ability to contribute financially. The contrast became painfully obvious during Patricia's birthday celebration. Daniel threw a surprise party at an upscale restaurant.
50 guests.
A 3-course meal, imported wine. The bill came to $4,000, and Daniel looked at me expectantly when the waiter brought the check. Dad, can you take care of this? This month is tight for us, you know? I paid without protest, as always, but I watched as Daniel took photos of every moment. How he hugged Patricia proudly, how he accepted the guests' congratulations for throwing such a spectacular party. At no point did he mention that I had financed the whole thing. The red flags multiplied when I got to know Carlos, Patricia's father. I discovered that Daniel talked to him about things he never discussed with me. Investments, business strategies, long-term plans. Carlos received respect and consultation. I received requests and obligations. Carlos is teaching me about the real estate market, Daniel told me during one of our rare phone calls. He has an incredible vision for business. I wish I had a mentor like that when I was younger. His words were a silent slap in the face. I had worked 60-hour weeks for decades. I had built a solid career from the ground up and financed his education and his dreams. But Carlos, who had inherited his wealth, was considered the valuable mentor. That year's Christmas marked a painful turning point. Daniel came to my apartment with a gift for me, a generic shirt and socks, clearly a last-minute buy. In contrast, he had spent weeks planning the perfect gift for Carlos, a set of professional golf clubs that cost more than my monthly salary. Carlos plays golf every weekend, Daniel explained as he proudly unwrapped the gift. These clubs are exactly what he needed to improve his handicap. That night, alone in my apartment, I unwrapped my socks and reflected on the irony. The man who had sacrificed everything for his son received convenient trinkets, while the wealthy father-in-law received gifts chosen with genuine care and affection. I didn't know it then, but I was about to experience the final humiliation that would change everything forever. The months leading up to that fateful Father's Day were full of small indignities that, in retrospect, were crystal-clear warnings of what was to come. In February, during a casual visit to Daniel's home, I found a brochure for a resort in the Bahamas on his desk. "Oh, that," Patricia said when she noticed my curiosity. "Carlos is taking us all. He says the family needs quality time together. The family, all except me." "When are you going?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Next week. The twins are so excited. It'll be their first time on a tropical island." My grandchildren, whom I'd taken to the local water park every summer, because that's what my budget allowed, would now experience the Caribbean courtesy of their other grandfather. While I worked extra hours to save $100 for their birthday gifts, Carlos was financing adventures that would create lifelong memories. March revealed another painful disparity. The twins mentioned during our Sunday call that they had started horseback riding lessons. "Grandpa Carlos says riding will teach us discipline and elegance," my granddaughter explained with the innocence of her 8 years. The lessons cost $300 a month per child, a sum Daniel apparently found easily when it came to activities suggested by Carlos, but which became impossible when I suggested family outings. April brought a lesson in family hierarchy I wasn't prepared for. At one of the twins' birthdays, I arrived with a carefully chosen educational building set. My gift was set aside without much ceremony, but when Carlos arrived with his gift, a $500 electric bicycle, all attention was on him. Photographs, hugs, exclamations of amazement. "Grandpa Carlos, you're the best. This bike is incredible. my grandson shouted as Carlos smiled with paternal satisfaction. Daniel videotaped every second of his son's reaction to Carlos's gift. My gift remained forgotten in a corner like an unimportant afterthought. May intensified my education about my true place in this family. During a family dinner, Carlos casually mentioned that he had opened college savings accounts for the twins. 100,000 for each, he announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Higher education is an investment that can't wait. $100,000. The same amount I had spent on Daniel's education, but which had taken me years of sacrifice to accumulate. Carlos had handled it with a simple bank transfer. "That's so generous of you, Carlos," Daniel said with a gratitude I had never heard directed at me. "The kids are going to have so many opportunities thanks to you." That night, I drove home in introspective silence. For decades, I had believed that my value as a father and grandfather resided in my ability to provide, to sacrifice, to always be available financially. But Carlos had demonstrated that real money buys something I had never been able to offer: genuine respect. June brought the final humiliation that would change everything forever. A week before Father's Day, Daniel called with an unusual request. "Dad, I need to ask you for a special favor. Can you lend me $2,000? It's to buy something really important for Father's Day." My heart filled with hope. For the first time in months, my son was including me in his celebration plans. Perhaps he had noticed the growing distance. Maybe he had reflected on our decades together. "Of course, son. What is it for?" "It's a surprise, but it's going to be something very meaningful. I promise you'll like the result." I transferred the money that same afternoon, imagining he had organized something special for us: a dinner, a trip, an experience that would honor our father-son relationship. A week later, I discovered exactly what my $2,000 had been used for. It was the down payment on the $50,000 Rolex he gave Carlos. My money had partially funded the most generous gift Daniel had ever given, but it was not for me. That Father's Day, as I held my crumpled $5 bill and saw the Rolex shining on Carlos's wrist, I finally understood the devastating truth. It wasn't that my son didn't have money for a better gift. It was that I simply didn't deserve one. But the humiliation of that day didn't end with the gift. During lunch, I witnessed something that completely destroyed me. Carlos began to tell anecdotes about his entrepreneurial youth, about how he had built his real estate empire from the ground up. Elegant lies, because I knew from Patricia that he had inherited everything from his father. Nevertheless, Daniel listened with the admiration of a disciple, nodding with reverential respect. "Tell us more about that investment in Miami," Daniel begged, while I remained invisible at my own celebration. I tried to participate in the conversation by mentioning a successful project I had led at my company years ago. Daniel looked at me with impatience, as if I had interrupted something important. "Dad, let Carlos talk. He was telling us about real investment strategies." Real investment strategies, as if my 30 years of professional experience were child's play compared to Carlos's inherited financial adventures. The afternoon became even more surreal when Patricia announced they had decided to completely remodel their house. A $200,000 project that included a pool, a gourmet kitchen, and a designer office. "Carlos is connecting us with the best architects in the city," Patricia explained with enthusiasm. "He says a house should reflect the status of the family that lives in it." Meanwhile, I lived in my one-bedroom apartment, the same one I had moved into after selling my four-bedroom house to help Daniel with his temporary difficulties 3 years ago. Those difficulties that had apparently resolved themselves magically without my knowledge. "And how are you going to finance all that?" I asked with genuine curiosity. Daniel exchanged a knowing look with Patricia before responding. "We have our sources. Carlos is teaching us about intelligent leverage." Intelligent leverage, the elegant code for money from a rich father-in-law. That night, after returning to my apartment with my $5 bill as my only memory of my celebration, I began to process the magnitude of my emotional blindness. For years, I had interpreted every request for help as a sign of trust, every loan as an investment in our relationship. But Daniel had never truly needed my money. What he needed was to keep me busy, distant from his real life, entertained with the illusion of being important while he built his true family with Carlos as the patriarch. The following days brought even more disturbing revelations. I began to notice details I had overlooked for months. The family photos on social media, where I was conspicuously absent. The celebrations I wasn't invited to. The important decisions made without consulting me. I called Daniel the next Wednesday to confirm my suspicions. Son, I saw the photos of the twins' piano graduation. They looked beautiful in their new suits. Oh yeah, it was a nice ceremony.
Why wasn't I invited? An awkward silence on the other end of the line. Dad, it was a small thing.
It was just the immediate family. I saw Carlos was there. Well, he helped pay for the lessons. Patricia thought it would be appropriate for him to be there. Carlos had helped pay for the lessons, the same lessons I had offered to finance 6 months earlier, and had been told were unnecessary because the children needed to learn to value things by earning them. Apparently that philosophy didn't apply when the benefactor was Carlos. On Thursday, I discovered the twins had begun to call Carlos Grandpa Dad and me just Roberto when talking to their friends. Patricia had explained that it was more modern and less confusing to use first names instead of traditional family titles. But Carlos was still Grandpa Carlos in all circumstances. On Friday, I found the final straw. Patricia had published an emotional social media post about the blessing of having such a wise and generous father figure in their lives. The photograph showed Carlos hugging the twins in his perfectly manicured garden. The text detailed the infinite wisdom, limitless generosity, and unconditional love that Carlos provided the family. There were 300 comments from friends and family praising the beautiful grandpa-grandchildren relationship and congratulating Patricia on having such a wonderful father-in-law. Not a single mention of my existence. It was as if 50 years of sacrifices, loans, care, and love had been erased from family history. Realized, sitting in my small apartment, I made the decision that would change everything forever. I opened my laptop and began to draft a document Daniel would never expect to receive. A week later, my phone would ring 23 times in a single afternoon, but by then, it would be too late for pleas. That night, I began to calculate exactly how much I had invested in my relationship with Daniel over the last 10 years. The numbers that appeared on my screen left me breathless. $137,000 in loans that were never repaid, $43,000 in family emergencies, $26,000 in gifts for the twins, the down payment on their house, the car payments, the vacations, the bathroom renovation, the sound system, Patricia's new computer. It came to $206,000. My entire inheritance from Sarah had evaporated, financing the comfortable life of a son who gave me crumpled bills on my special day. But it wasn't just the money that crushed me. It was the sudden understanding that I had been systematically replaced in my own family. Carlos had not only usurped my place, he had done so with my unwitting funding. Every time I loaned money for a temporary crisis, that money freed up resources for Daniel to impress Carlos. Every one of my sacrifices indirectly became an opportunity for my son to build a stronger relationship with his other father figure. I had become the silent sponsor of my own exclusion. The bitterest revelation came when I reviewed my phone records from the past 6 months. Daniel called with a predictable frequency, always before important dates that required significant expenses. Christmas, the twins' birthdays, the start of the school year, unexpected home repairs. But he never called just to chat. He never asked about my well-being without having a request pending. Our conversations followed an identifiable script, a brief greeting, a superficial question about my health, a smooth transition to the financial need, a promise to repay, and an affectionate but hurried goodbye. I was a service, not a father. That morning, I made the most painful but liberating decision of my life. I would call my lawyer in the morning and change my will. But it wouldn't be an impulsive or vengeful decision. It would be strategic, final, and designed to teach a lesson Daniel would remember forever. The following Monday, I sat in the office of my trusted lawyer of 15 years, Miguel Rodriguez. I explained the situation with the calm of someone who has made an irrevocable decision. "Roberto, are you sure about this?" Miguel asked after listening to my story. "The changes you're asking for are radical." "Completely sure. I've been a fool for decades, but I won't be a fool until the day I die." The new will was a masterpiece of poetic justice. My entire inheritance, the house I had recovered by selling investments, The remaining savings, my life insurance, would be distributed among charities that help abandoned parents and neglected seniors. Daniel would receive exactly a symbolic $5 bill with a note attached. For all the Father's Days you gave me the same. But that wasn't all. I also included a special clause that converted all the outstanding loans into formal debts with retroactive interest. If Daniel wanted any future consideration from my estate, he would first have to pay the $243,000 he owed me. What if he tries to challenge the will? Miguel asked. That's why I need you to do something else. I handed him a thick folder I had prepared over the weekend. It contained copies of all the bank transfers, text messages promising repayment, emails describing temporary emergencies, and photographs of expensive gifts Daniel had bought for others while asking me for loans. It's a complete documentation of a pattern of systematic financial abuse, I explained. If he wants to fight legally, I have more evidence than he can handle. Ime 11 reviewed the documents with growing amazement. Roberto, this is a solid case. Any judge would clearly see the pattern of manipulation. Exactly. Daniel can choose between accepting the consequences of his actions or facing a public legal battle where all his hypocrisy is exposed. We signed the documents that same afternoon, but I had one final surprise for Daniel. I wouldn't tell him anything until the perfect moment. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. The following Thursday, Daniel called with another of his urgent requests. Dad, I need $8,000 before Friday. It's for the twins' enrollment in the summer camp Carlos recommended. If we don't pay tomorrow, we lose our spot. $8,000 for a summer camp. That's a very exclusive camp. Carlos says the connections the kids will make there will last a lifetime. Carlos says, always Carlos says, Daniel, I have a question before I make the transfer. Sure, Dad, but it's urgent, okay? When was the last time you invited me to your house without asking me for money? An awkward silence. Dad, I don't understand why you're being so dramatic. Just answer the question. More silence. Look, if you don't want to help with the camp, that's fine. Carlos can probably cover the difference. Carlos can probably cover the difference. Of course he can. Don't you worry about the camp, Daniel. Carlos will take care of it. What does that mean? It means you just had your last conversation with me as your personal bank. I hung up the phone and waited. A week later, the 23 desperate calls would confirm that I had made the right decision. After hanging up the phone, I decided to do something I should have done years ago, truly investigate my son's financial situation. If I was going to cut the economic umbilical cord for good, I needed to fully understand the dimension of his deceptions. My first stop was the County Public Records Office. As a citizen, I had the right to consult certain information about properties. What I discovered kept me up for days. Daniel's house, which he had supposedly bought with great sacrifice and my $75,000 down payment, had actually been acquired through a family trust managed by Carlos. My son was technically a tenant of a property his father-in-law completely controlled. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The current market value of that property was $800,000. The financial difficulties Daniel constantly mentioned were completely incompatible with living in a residence of that caliber. My next investigation was even more revealing. I discreetly hired a private investigator named Eduardo Ramirez, who specialized in family fraud cases. He was skeptical at first. Mr. Roberto, with all due respect, cases of financial abuse by children towards parents are rare. It's usually the other way around. Exactly. That's why no one suspects it. It's the perfect crime, wrapped in filial love. Eduardo began his investigation with professional skepticism. But 3 weeks later, he returned with a report that confirmed my worst suspicions. Daniel was officially working as a business consultant for one of Carlos's companies, with an annual salary of $120,000. He also received quarterly bonuses that averaged $30,000. His real income exceeded $200,000 a year. Your son doesn't just have no financial problems, Eduardo explained, as we reviewed the legally obtained bank documents. He's in the top percentile of earners for his age in this city. Patricia also worked part-time as an event coordinator for Carlos's family's charitable foundation. Her additional salary was $60,000 a year for only 20 hours a week. Together, they made more money than I had seen in my entire life, while asking me for loans for basic emergencies. But Eduardo saved the most devastating revelation for last. Mr. Roberto, I found something else. Your son has 3 different savings accounts, 2 investment funds, and a professionally managed stock portfolio. The total value of his liquid assets exceeds $500,000. Furgoy's $1,000 in savings and investments while I was living in a rental apartment and working extra hours just to lend him money he never planned to repay. How is it possible that he has so much money saved if he's constantly asking me for loans? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because you are his source of free financing. Every time you lend him money for current expenses, he can keep his investments and savings untouched. It's a brilliant financial strategy, though ethically repugnant. Eve, the next phase of my investigation focused on Carlos and his true relationship with Daniel. What I discovered finally explained the family dynamic I had observed for years. Carlos hadn't just adopted Daniel as his favorite son-in-law by chance. He had systematically identified my son's emotional insecurities and needs, providing him with the masculine validation and social status I could never offer. Daniel didn't just receive money from Carlos. He received identity, prestige, and access to exclusive social circles. In exchange, he acted as the son Carlos never had, the heir to his companies and the continuation of his legacy. I was tolerated in this equation only as a secondary financial provider. My function was to keep certain family expenses covered so Carlos didn't have to worry about minor costs. I was an emotional and economic subcontractor in my own son's life. Dudo also discovered something that broke my heart but filled me with determination. Daniel had been planning for 2 years to legally formalize his adoption by Carlos. The twins would change their last names. He would formally inherit the companies, and I would be completely eliminated from the family structure. He has documents prepared for when you are no longer present, Eduardo informed me delicately. You mean when I die? Exactly. Your son has been waiting for that moment to formalize his new family identity without emotional complications. That night, reviewing all the documents Eduardo had compiled, I understood that my son had not only been stealing money from me for years, he had been stealing my time, my dignity, and the opportunity to have a genuine relationship with my grandchildren. Every loan I made supported a bigger lie. Every sacrifice of mine allowed Daniel to live a double life where I was simultaneously indispensable and invisible. Criaran to play strategically. I called Eduardo for one last request. I need you to document all of this legally. Every transaction, every lie, every manipulation. We're going to build a case so solid that when my son discovers what I've done, he'll have absolutely no defense. The moment of truth was approaching, and this time, Daniel would discover that underestimating his father was the most costly mistake of his life. With all the information Eduardo had gathered, I designed a plan that would not only protect me financially, but also expose Daniel to the real consequences of his actions. It would not be emotional revenge, it would be calculated justice. My first move was to contact the bank where I had my main account. I requested a meeting with the manager, Maria Garcia, who had known me for 15 years due to my constant deposits and impeccable credit history. Mr. Roberto, how can we help you today? Maria, I need to establish specific protections on my account. Someone has been financially abusing my trust, and I need immediate preventive measures. I showed her some of the documentation Eduardo had prepared. Her eyes widened as she processed the magnitude of the systematic abuse. This is incredible. Your own son has been... Exactly, and I need to make sure he can't continue doing it. Maria helped me implement several safeguards, including special security codes for any transaction over $500, automatic alerts for transfers, and, most importantly, a total block on anyone other than myself. My next stop was the office of a forensic accountant, Ricardo Mendez, who specialized in recovering money lost to family fraud. Ricardo had handled similar cases and immediately understood my situation. Mr. Roberto, what your son has done technically constitutes financial fraud, even among family members. Loans without the intent to repay, especially when obtained through deception, are legally prosecutable. What are my options? We can initiate an asset recovery process. If your son has $500,000 in investments, as the report indicates, we could freeze those funds until the debt he owes you is resolved. The idea filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years.
Daniel had been playing with financial fire,
And now he would discover the flames could burn him. But my master stroke would be different. Instead of proceeding legally right away, I decided to give him one final chance to prove if anything was left of the son I had raised with so much love. That opportunity came when Daniel called me again, 3 days after our last tense conversation. Dad, I'm sorry if I sounded bad last time. I'm stressed with work and I didn't mean to be rude to you. His conciliatory tone confirmed that he had noticed the change in my attitude, but his next words revealed that he still didn't understand the seriousness of the situation. Look, forget about the summer camp, but the twins need new school uniforms. It's only $2,000. Can you help us with that? $2,000. After everything I had discovered, he still had the audacity to ask me for money as if nothing had changed. Daniel, I have a different proposal.
What kind of proposal?
I want you to come to my apartment this Saturday, just you, without Patricia, without the twins. We need to have a serious conversation about our relationship. I don't need family drama. If you can help with the uniforms, great. If not, I understand. It's not drama, Daniel. It's a conversation we should have had years ago. Come Saturday at 3 in the afternoon, or we'll never have another chance to talk as father and son. The silence on the other end told me he had caught the seriousness in my voice. Okay, I'll be there Saturday. That week, I meticulously prepared for the confrontation. I organized all of Eduardo's documents into chronological folders. I printed bank statements showing every transfer I had made. I prepared a presentation that would show Daniel exactly how he had manipulated me for years. But I also prepared a compassionate alternative. If Daniel showed genuine remorse, if he fully acknowledged his behavior and committed to changing it, I would be willing to rebuild our relationship under completely different terms. However, I had a premonition that this option would not be necessary. Saturday arrived with a torrential downpour. Daniel showed up at my door at exactly 3, looking impatient and slightly irritated from getting wet. Dad, I hope this doesn't take too long. Patricia organized a family dinner, and I promised I'd be back by 6. A family dinner to which I had not been invited, of course. Sit down, Daniel. What I have to show you will change our relationship forever. I placed the first folder on my small dining table. It contained bank records from the last 5 years, with every transfer I had made to him highlighted in yellow. What is this? He asked as he skimmed the documents. It's a complete inventory of all the loans I've given you. $206,000 in total. His face paled slightly, but he kept his composure. Dad, if this is about money, we can make a payment plan. You haven't seen everything yet. I opened the second folder. It contained copies of his financial statements that Eduardo had legally obtained. Daniel froze when he saw his own bank documents spread out in front of him. $500,000 in assets, $200,000 in annual income, flourishing investment accounts. How did you get this? The right question is, why did you lie to me for years about your financial situation? For the first time since he had arrived, Daniel had no immediate answer. His eyes nervously shifted between the documents, likely calculating how much of his strategy had been exposed. Dad, I can explain all this. I'm sure you can, and you're going to do it right now. Safeguard, but before he could respond, I showed him the third and most devastating folder of all. It contained the adoption documents Daniel had been secretly preparing with Carlos, copies of legal forms, correspondence with lawyers, and the detailed plan to officially change the twins' last names once I passed away. When Daniel saw those papers, his mask of composure completely crumbled. Dad, this isn't what it looks like. It's not what it looks like. They're official documents prepared by your lawyer to legally erase me from the family. They include a statement from you describing how Carlos has been more of a father to you than your biological one. Daniel abruptly stood up, pacing nervously around my small living room. Listen, those documents were Patricia's idea. I never wanted to hurt you. Daniel, sit down and listen to me carefully because this is the last thing I'm going to explain to you as your father. His defensive tone changed when he caught the finality in my voice. I have completely changed my will. Your inheritance now consists of exactly $5. The rest of my estate will be distributed among organizations that help parents abandoned by ungrateful children. You can't do that. I can and I already have. But there's more. I have converted all your outstanding loans into formal debts with legal interest. You owe exactly $243,000, including retroactive interest. Daniel was paralyzed, processing the financial implications. Furthermore, I continued, I have initiated the legal process to freeze your assets until you settle that debt. Ricardo Mendez, my forensic accountant, has authorization to proceed with a preventive embargo if I don't receive a satisfactory response from you by Friday. This is insane. I'm your son. Exactly, and that's why it hurts more than you can imagine to discover that for years you have seen me only as a dispensable financial resource. Turbulence began to pace with growing desperation. Dad, can we fix this? I can pay you back the money gradually. With what money, Daniel? The same money you've been hiding while asking me for loans for emergencies? I showed him copies of his most recent bank statements. You have $500,000 in investments. You could have paid me back every cent at any time in the last 3 years. You chose not to. Those savings are for my children's future. And what kind of future are you building by teaching them that they can exploit and discard the people who love them? Daniel stopped in front of the window, looking at the rain with a defeated expression. What do you want me to do? I want you to tell me the truth. For the first time in years, I want an honest conversation, without manipulation, without excuses, without lies. He turned to me, his eyes moist, but not with genuine remorse. It was pure panic about the consequences of his actions. Okay, you're right. I didn't need that money. But Dad, Carlos offered me opportunities you never could. Connections, status, a better future for my kids. And that justified treating me like an emotional ATM? I didn't want to hurt you, but I needed to maintain both relationships. From you, I got financial security. From Carlos, I got professional growth. His brutal honesty confirmed that nothing was left of the son I had raised. This was a calculating stranger who had learned to exploit a father's love for personal gain. Daniel, you just confessed that you consciously manipulated me for years. Do you understand the gravity of what you're telling me? Dad, please, we can fix this. I'll give back every cent. I'll cut ties with Carlos if I have to. You don't need to cut ties with Carlos. He's given you something I never could. The opportunity to choose who you really want to be. You have until Friday to transfer $10,000 as a down payment on your debt. The rest you'll pay in monthly installments with interest. If you comply, we'll maintain limited contact. If you don't, we will proceed legally and we will not see each other again. Dad, wait, what about the kids? My children won't be able to see their grandfather. Your children have been raised to call me by my first name and consider Carlos their real grandfather. I think they'll be perfectly fine without me. Daniel walked toward the door with hesitant steps. And if I pay for everything, could we go back to being a normal family? Daniel, after this conversation, we can never go back to being a normal family. But maybe with a lot of work on your part, we could become an honest family. He left my apartment without saying goodbye. 20 minutes later, the phone calls began. First call. Dad, I've been thinking, and I want to apologize properly. Second call. Please don't do this. We can find a solution that works for everyone. Third call. Patricia is crying. The kids are asking why Grandpa is mad. Fourth call. Carlos says you might be making a legal mistake. Maybe you should reconsider. By the 10th call, I had stopped answering. By the 20th, I had disconnected the phone. Friday came without a single bank transfer. On Monday, Ricardo Mendez proceeded with the preventive embargo. That afternoon, Daniel showed up at my door with an expression I had never seen before. Pure financial terror. But it was too late for tears or pleas. On Tuesday morning, as I reviewed the preventive embargo documents Ricardo had successfully executed, I heard 3 firm knocks on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and after the drama of the past few days, any unexpected visit put me on high alert. When I opened the door, I found an elegant woman in her 40s, with perfectly styled brunette hair and clothes that signaled wealth. I didn't recognize her immediately. Mr. Roberto Mendoza? Yes, how can I help you? My name is Sofia Herrera. I'm Carlos's sister, and I urgently need to speak with you about your son Daniel and my brother, the sister of Carlos. My first reaction was to suspect she was an emissary, coming to negotiate some kind of truce or financial arrangement. But something in her expression suggested her intentions were different. Please come in, I said, offering her a seat in my modest living room. Sophia looked around the apartment with a mix of curiosity and what seemed like genuine respect. Mr. Roberto, what I have to tell you will completely change your perspective on what has been happening in your family. She settled into the armchair and took a deep breath before continuing. My brother Carlos is not the person he pretends to be. For the past 3 years, I have been secretly documenting his activities because I suspected something was terribly wrong. She pulled a folder from her elegant leather bag. Carlos has been executing what I call a hostile emotional adoption of your son Daniel. It's a pattern he has repeated with other young men in the past. What does that mean exactly? Sophia opened the folder and showed me photographs, documents, and what appeared to be transcripts of conversations. My brother identifies young men with professional potential, but with emotional insecurities related to father figures. He systematically seduces them with money, opportunities, and the masculine validation their real fathers cannot provide. The photographs showed Carlos with different young men over the years, always in the same pattern. Exclusive dinners, expensive gifts, introductions to select social circles. What's his ultimate goal? Absolute control. Carlos never married or had biological children, but he has informally adopted 6 young men over the last 15 years. They all ended up completely estranged from their original families. She showed me legal documents that chilled me to the bone. Carlos currently controls the finances, professional decisions, and even the family relationships of these 6 men. He turned them into extensions of his own identity. And what happened to their original fathers? Sophia's expression became deeply sad. 3 of them died without reconciling with their sons. 2 more are completely isolated, living in loneliness, while their sons build new family identities around Carlos. The 6th is your son, Daniel. My heart started to race as I processed the implications. Mr. Roberto, your son didn't consciously choose to abandon you. He has been a victim of sophisticated psychological manipulation, designed specifically to create emotional dependence on my brother. Sophia showed me audio recordings she had secretly obtained during family gatherings at Carlos's house. Listen to this. It's from 6 months ago. Carlos's voice sounded clear on the recording. Daniel, your father represents your mediocre past. I represent your extraordinary future, but you can't have both. Successful men must choose loyalties. Daniel's voice responded with evident insecurity. But I feel guilty taking so much money from him when you already give me so much. That guilt is exactly what keeps you tied to mediocrity. Great entrepreneurs use all available resources. Your father is a resource. I am an opportunity. I stopped the recording with trembling hands. Why are you showing me this? Why now? Because my brother has gone too far this time. The adoption documents he prepared for Daniel include legally transferring custody of your grandchildren to him if something happens to Daniel or Patricia. What? Carlos is planning to officially become the legal guardian of your grandchildren. Those children will grow up believing my brother is their true grandfather and that you never existed. The information was devastating, but it also explained behaviors I hadn't been able to fully understand. How did you stop his other victims? I didn't stop them in time, but with Daniel there is still hope. The embargo you executed yesterday was perfect. Carlos lost control over Daniel's finances for the first time in years. Sophia pulled a phone from her bag. Last night I overheard a phone conversation between Carlos and Daniel that will change everything. She pressed play, and I listened to Carlos's furious voice. How did you let your father discover our financial arrangements? I told you to keep that relationship completely separate. Daniel sounded desperate. I didn't know he was investigating. I never thought he would have the resources to hire professionals. Now I'll have to accelerate the adoption plans. If your father continues to interfere, we could lose control of the whole situation. What do you want me to do? Convince him to back down. Use the kids. Use emotions. Use whatever it takes. If it doesn't work, we'll proceed with the alternative we discussed.
Carlos, I don't know if I can do that to my own father.
Daniel, you have to choose definitively. Him or me. You can't keep playing both fields. The recording ended, and silence filled my small living room. What's that alternative they mentioned? Sophia looked at me with a grave expression. Carlos has hired lawyers to have you declared mentally incompetent. He plans to use the sudden change in your will and the recent legal actions as evidence of senile mental deterioration. He can do that with enough money and specialized lawyers. He can try, and if he succeeds, Daniel would regain control of his inheritance while you would be institutionalized. Action was more profound and sinister than I had imagined. Carlos wasn't just stealing sons, he was systematically destroying families. Miss Sophia, why are you risking so much to help me? Because I've seen what my brother did to 5 previous families. I cannot allow him to destroy a 6th. She handed me one last folder.
Here's all the evidence you need to completely expose Carlos's operations.
Recordings, financial documents, testimonies from the other destroyed families. What do you suggest I do? That you confront Daniel with this information before Carlos executes his alternative plan. Your son needs to know that he has been a victim as much as a perpetrator. That night, with all the pieces of the puzzle finally in place, I understood that the battle to get my son back was just beginning. Armed with the devastating information Sophia had provided, I carefully planned my final confrontation with Daniel. But this time, it wouldn't be just between father and son. It would be a full intervention to free him from Carlos's systematic manipulation. I called Daniel that same night after Sophia had left. I need to see you tomorrow morning. It's urgent and it can't wait. Dad, if this is about the money, I already talked to Patricia. We're looking for options to liquidate some investments. It's not just about money, Daniel. It's about your entire life and the future of your children. The grave tone of my voice must have alerted him because he agreed to meet without further protest. At 10 in the morning on Wednesday, Daniel arrived at my apartment looking haggard. The past few days had taken a visible toll on his appearance. He had deep circles under his eyes and a facial tension I had never seen before. Sit down, Daniel. What I'm about to show you will change your understanding of everything you've experienced over the last 3 years. I placed the recordings Sophia had shared with me on the table, starting with the most revealing one, the conversation where Carlos described his hostile emotional adoption strategy. As Daniel listened to his own voice being expertly manipulated by Carlos, his expression evolved from confusion to growing horror. This can't be real. Carlos never saw me as a project. Listen to the complete recording before you judge. Urgency. For the next 20 minutes, Daniel listened as Carlos coldly discussed his psychological control techniques, how he had identified his specific insecurities, and how he had systematically planned his estrangement from me. I have repeated this process 6 times, we heard Carlos say in one recording. The key is to make them believe they are choosing freely when in reality they are following a script that I wrote. Daniel stood up abruptly, starting to pace in circles around my small living room. No, it's not possible. He genuinely cares about me, about my career. I showed him the documents Sophia had shared about Carlos's 5 previous victims. Here are the names and stories of the other men Carlos adopted before you. They all followed the exact same pattern. Premises read the files with growing agitation. The similarities were undeniable. Young professionals with potential, working-class fathers, gradual estrangement from their original families, and total economic and emotional dependence on Carlos. But I'm not like them. My relationship with Carlos is different. Different how? He promised you would inherit his companies. He promised the exact same thing to the other 5. I showed him copies of previous wills where Carlos had named each of his prior victims as the sole heir, only to change the documents when the next candidate appeared. Daniel, Carlos isn't looking for an heir. He's looking for control. He wants to create male versions of himself who can validate his worldview. My son fell into the armchair, holding his head in his hands. If this is true, what have I done with my life? What have I done to you? You have been the victim of an expert manipulator, but you have also made conscious decisions that deeply hurt the people who love you. I handed him the most recent recording, where Carlos discussed the plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. When Daniel heard the details of the plot to institutionalize me, his face completely fell apart. No, I didn't know about this. I never would have allowed it. Would you have had a choice? How many important decisions have you made in the last few years without consulting Carlos first? The silence that followed was more eloquent than any answer. Dad, how can I fix this? How can I undo so much damage? First, you need to fully understand the situation. Sophia warned me that Carlos will accelerate his plans now that the financial embargo has made him nervous. I explained the adoption documents that included transferring legal custody of the twins to Carlos. Your children will grow up believing Carlos is their true grandfather. You will be gradually marginalized from their lives, just as I was marginalized from yours. Daniel turned pale. The documents are already prepared? According to Sophia, yes. They just need your signature, which Carlos will obtain with some emotional or financial justification. What can I do to stop him? First, you have to choose definitively. You can't maintain both loyalties. Either you rebuild your relationship with me and protect your children, or you continue to be Carlos's puppet. Out the window for several minutes. If I choose to break with Carlos, I'll lose everything. The job, the house, the social connections, my entire current lifestyle. And what do you gain by keeping that lifestyle? The truth? I'm not sure of anything anymore. I handed him a proposal I had prepared during the night. These are my conditions for rebuilding our relationship. They are not negotiable. Strengthening read the document with growing attention. First, a complete and immediate break with Carlos and his circle of influence. Second, a partial liquidation of your investments to settle at least half of your debt with me. Third, move to a home you can afford with your own salary without subsidies from Carlos. Fourth, the twins must reestablish regular contact with me as their paternal grandfather. Fifth, total financial transparency, complete access to your accounts and economic decisions. Sixth, mandatory family therapy to rebuild damaged bonds. These conditions are narrow. For years, you accepted much stricter conditions from Carlos without questioning them. The difference is my conditions are designed to free you, not to control you. And if I accept but I can't fully comply, then you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices. But at least they will be your choices, not Carlos's. Daniel put the document in his jacket. I need time to think. You have until Friday. After that date, I will proceed with all available legal measures to protect myself from future abuse. When he left, I knew I had planted the seeds of a decision that would determine not only our future, but the future of my grandchildren. On Thursday night, I received a call that would change everything forever. At 11:15 p.m., my phone rang with the urgency of bad news. It was Daniel, but his voice sounded different. There was a new clarity, a determination I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. Dad, I need to see you now. I just had the most important confrontation of my life. He arrived at my apartment 30 minutes later, accompanied by Patricia and the twins. It was the first time in 2 years that the whole family had come to visit me together without a special occasion or a financial request. Dad, Daniel began as the children sat shyly on my couch. I told Patricia everything about Carlos, about the manipulation, about how I treated you for years. Patricia, who had always maintained a polite distance from me, approached with eyes red from crying. Roberto, I didn't know the dimension of what was happening. Carlos had convinced me that you didn't understand the complexities of our financial situation. The twins looked at me with renewed curiosity, as if seeing me for the first time as a real person rather than a peripheral figure in their lives. What happened with Carlos? I asked. Daniel took a deep breath before responding. I went to his house this afternoon and told him I had discovered his manipulation. At first he denied everything, but when I showed him the recording Sophia gave you, his mask completely fell off. How did he react? He transformed into a person I had never seen before. Cold, calculating, threatening. He told me that if I broke with him, he would destroy me financially and make sure I couldn't work at any serious company in the city. Patricia interjected. But then Daniel did something that filled me with so much pride. He told Carlos he would rather start from scratch with dignity than continue to be his puppet. And the adoption documents? I destroyed them in front of him, Daniel replied firmly. I told him his grandchildren had a real grandfather who loved them, and they didn't need a manipulative substitute. Hadn't experienced in years genuine pride in the strength of character my son had finally shown. The twins, who had been listening in silence, approached me with the naturalness of their age. "Grandpa Roberto," my granddaughter said, "Dad explained that we treated you badly without realizing it. Can you forgive us?" My heart melted as I hugged those children I had watched grow up from a distance. "Of course I forgive you. This was not your fault." Swallowing the next few weeks, I witnessed a family transformation that seemed impossible only a month earlier. Daniel meticulously fulfilled every one of my conditions. He resigned from his job with Carlos and got a job at a competing company, earning 30% less, but with complete professional autonomy. He sold the house that technically belonged to Carlos and moved into a modest but fully owned residence. The partial liquidation of his investments generated $150,000, which he immediately transferred to settle most of his debt with me. We established a payment plan for the remaining $93,000, but the most significant changes were emotional. Daniel began individual therapy to process years of psychological manipulation. Patricia joined him in couple sessions to rebuild their marriage on a foundation of honesty rather than financial convenience. The twins reestablished weekly contact with me. Every Saturday, they came to my apartment for lunches that extended into the afternoon. Slowly, we rebuilt the grandfather-grandchildren relationship that Carlos had systematically sabotaged. 3 months after the day that changed everything, I received an unexpected call from Sophia. "Roberto, I have important news about my brother." "What happened?" "Carlos is being investigated by the district attorney. 2 of his previous victims have filed formal complaints for financial fraud and systematic psychological manipulation." "What does that mean?" "It means his pattern of abuse is finally being exposed publicly. Daniel's testimony will be crucial to the case." Daniel did not hesitate to cooperate fully with the authorities. His detailed statement about Carlos's methods helped build a solid case that resulted in both criminal and civil investigations. 6 months later, Carlos was convicted on multiple charges of fraud, financial manipulation, and systematic psychological abuse. His victims recovered a large portion of the stolen money, and more importantly, several families began reconciliation processes similar to ours. Today, a year after that Father's Day humiliation that nearly destroyed me, I can say it was the most important blessing in disguise of my life. Daniel and I have rebuilt our relationship on a completely new foundation. Mutual respect, radical honesty, and clear but loving boundaries. I am no longer his financial resource, but his respected and consulted father. Patricia has become a genuinely caring daughter-in-law now that Carlos's toxic influence has been removed. The twins call me Grandpa with the natural affection that should have always existed. My new life includes activities I had abandoned for years while serving as the family's ATM. I joined a chess club, started dance classes, and even began dating a charming widow named Elena, whom I met at the public library. The most valuable lesson I learned is that true love requires healthy boundaries. For decades, I had confused being used with being loved and being needed with being valued. I learned that a father can love his children deeply without allowing them to exploit or disrespect him. Daniel also changed radically. He became a more authentic man, more present with his family, more grateful for real blessings instead of artificial ones. His current professional success is genuine, based on his own merit rather than manipulative connections. On Sundays, we have lunch together as a family, but now the conversations include real consultations about important decisions, gratitude expressed regularly, and the mutual acknowledgement of past mistakes and present growth. My will has been changed again, restoring Daniel as the primary heir, but with clauses that protect both my dignity and his integrity. The lessons learned were formalized in legal terms that benefit both generations. At 63, I discovered that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity, set healthy boundaries, and teach the people you love the difference between being loved and being used. My story proves that sometimes the most loving act a father can do is say no more and stand firm until respect is restored. True love is not begged for, it is not bought, and it is definitely not earned through the constant sacrifice of one's own dignity.